you had this great line in another interview that I saw when I was doing prep for this, where you talked about, because you've written more than a few sad songs in your time, and you said you can feel sad songs coming before they even become songs, which I thought was fascinating. And I'm wondering, how does that play out? How does that manifest in you?
Oh, good question. Uh, you, I mean, you either have some kind of a line, you in driving in the car or walking around or whatever, things come to you that just kind of bubble up from the subconscious, and I try to put them on the phone, record them, and then see what I've got at a later date. And sometimes, you put that line up on the page, and all of a sudden, you get people that start to inhabit it, or all those things that inhabit memories. And you may not have been thinking of that at the time, and that's just part of the process, that you're not always aware of where your source is, but it comes from that place that originally touched you for whatever reason. And often it's lost, because loss is felt so, in some ways, I think, so much deeper than just happiness. Joy
Mm-hmm.
is another thing, but we don't experience real joy uh, all that often. um, I, I think that it's the sad stuff, the loss of family and friends and pets, and you know
Mm-hmm.
whatever situations that hangs in there. And when that comes back up, it tends to flood you. And a lot of times that's where the songs that people identify most with come from.
Mm-hmm. And well, so the converse to that is, I'm wondering, is it more difficult for you to write a happy song, or anyone to write a happy song, because it doesn't have that same depth of feeling that you were talking about?
I think it's really hard to write a happy or a joyful song, because a joyful song would have the same kind of overwhelming emotion, feeling that the real sad song had. But articulating it, I guess you could, you know, you would do it by telling the story, uh,
Mm-hmm.
produce that joy. Um, I don't have a lot of joyful songs that I quote chapter and verse.
And yet, as I was watching other interviews you've done, I wonder if people might be surprised to find out you seem like a pretty amiable, happy person, on a regular basis. And yet, but you have this gift for touching, and putting words to and melody to this sense of loss. And I'm wondering, though, as a result, do you have this like great catharsis that the rest of us maybe don't have, and that you can really channel that into your art? And so, it's this release valve that maybe some of us don't have.
Yes, one of my um criteria for recognizing when I had a good song is that there would be that accompanying emotion and feeling, often producing a tear, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that told you that you have something, that you need to explore this. The trick is not just feeling it, but translating it. Hopefully, deepening it with craft or art. And that's what you hope you get from your song, that you've had something genuine that touched you. Now, how do you take that and translate it so it can touch others?
Mm-hmm. And then, addressing this particular album, Circular Turns, some of these, part of it's a studio album, part of it's live recording, and some of these songs are, well, to be honest, as old as I am, which is, and I'm not the youngest
As
kid.
old as I am.
Right. um, And I'm wondering though, in all that time, do you look at any of these songs differently than when you first crafted them?
Oh, yes. Well, I think every time, I mean, if you put them away for a while, right, and you haven't heard them,
Mm-hmm.
you come back to them, the same process still applies. There's still people that you knew. There's scenes that you were in. That whole rotogravure of memory comes back in those songs, and I mean that's largely why you wrote them. And when you've forgotten them for a little bit, I mean the icing, of course, is how well they were played, and that's the other part that carries the emotion, the music. Um, but yeah, I mean, they jump right out at you. You know, you
Mm.
can't help it.
Yeah. And your songs have been played by an amazingly excuse me, eclectic crew of artists throughout the decades. Everyone from, well, Elvis to Alison Krauss and Jackson Browne. What I'm wondering is, have any of these people who have recorded your songs, have any of them brought out something in a song that you didn't necessarily notice when you first created it?
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, somebody asked me that the other day in referencing "Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues,"
Mm-hmm.
and like what was my favorite version. And my favorite version was and still is largely Waylon's version, because he brought something of his own to it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the key. If somebody can take it and make it their own, um, I wish I could reference that better. I mean, I love the way Alison Krauss cut. She didn't actually put it on an album. She recorded it for Cracker Barrel, I think.
Okay.
Um, Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues, but she did Never Got Off the Ground. That's true.
Mm-hmm. And then talking about Waylon, specifically Waylon Jennings, um, what I don't know, because again, what can you describe what it is that he brought to it, or how he changed it, or how he spun it that was so alluring?
Well, I mean, he didn't change the song. I mean, he kept all the parts, but he just made it his own.
Hmm.
When you hear it, it doesn't sound like a copy of my version. It sounds like Waylon. And to me, that's the most important thing. What did you find in the song of your own that allowed you to make it your own?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's I'm sure true of all composers, that when they hear someone do it, did they bring something new or even refined to it that you hadn't quite imagined?
Yeah. There's like the ultimate version of that I've ever read about was supposedly um after Bob Dylan heard Jimi Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, Dylan started performing it Hendrix's way, thinking, wow, that was better than how I initially did it.
Yeah, what a great compliment that is.
Yeah.
Two
Um, and I mean, and the same can be said, with all these songs that are on this album and that you've crafted over the years. They've been done by such a variety of artists. It's not just country, it's not just rock, it's not just pop. Um, and I'm wondering, what's the key to writing a song that can be that versatile, that can be used by so many different types of singers?
You don't come with that as your first impulse. um, you're just I'm just glad for whatever I get.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't all that easy to plow the field and unearth something from memory and the past. Um, ask me the question again. I started thinking about how I wrote these.
No, no problem. I was just wondering, if your songs are so versatile and done by so many different types of artists, what is the key to writing a song that can be so versatile and used by so many different musicians?
Well, a lot of times it's the musicians themselves hearing something either for themselves or of themselves in it, and then adapting it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of stuff that I've written with other people, I can't play the music. You know, it was done with computers or it was done with a keyboard or something, and I don't play keyboards.
Mm.
So in that case, you know, I have no idea, um, you know, how to, you know, effectively translate the song other than just, you know, singing it. Um, but it's the inspiration of writing it uh, that got me there. That, you know, there was something of me that it triggered uh, a response from.
Mm-hmm. And
You know, I
then
don't answered your question actually.
yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those questions I didn't know if there was even an answer to it or if it was, even possible, but um, I was curious if there was, because I'm someone who's never written a song, but I've interviewed a lot of songwriters, and so to me, it's still this mysterious art form, and part of me is just always curious how much of it is craft and how much of it is just the muse whispering in your ear.
Well, the fundament is craft. You know, it starts with the line, whatever the line is, and however you got it. I mean, it's, you know, like a painting in that sense, that it starts with that first thing that inspired you to, you know, open up on the canvas in the first place. Uh, you know, where it comes from is just the depth of experience. And if you were to try and find that experience and recount it with any kind of accuracy, you probably couldn't. So it's this, you know, sort of dream melange that you get that, you know, kind of tells you from the subconscious that you need to pay attention to it, however it
Mm-hmm.
is. And whatever that first thing is, it could be just a simple pattern on the guitar, or it could be a line or two. And then your obligation, of course, is then to apply your craft and whittle it down and shape it until it's a form um, that you can begin to sing.
Mm.
The tricky part is that, you know, you can have an idea, but getting it into a lyric as opposed to simply a poem or a story or whatever other format, that's the trick, because you have to be able to sing it. And ideally, you don't want it so complicated that no one else can sing it.
Right, right. No, that's yeah. No, I never thought about that. So it's like in a way you write for yourself and for other people simultaneously.
Well, you're always writing for yourself because you're trying to extricate something. You know, it's that grain of sand that produces the pearl, ideally, or kills the oyster, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get there is, you know, that's what you learn over the years. How can I, you know, buff and polish this so that it, if not gem like, at least it is something that when people see it, it's attractive, or when they hear it, it's attractive, and it touches something in them. That's the deal, that we all have that reservoir of feeling and emotion. And if you can craft it, you know, it isn't just enough to, you know, spill it out on the page. You have to turn it into, you know, something, if not art, at least craft, that, you know, the ear, when it hears it, is moved by it and either remembers it or begins to sing along with it, however, you know, however it works for the person who hears it.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, I think I know what you mean, but I'm curious, what is your definition of the difference between art and craft? Because sometimes those terms are used interchangeably.
Well, craft is the essential mechanicals of the process. You know, whether it's painting or sculpting, or, you know, you have to learn how to use your tools um, to evoke that response in whatever medium you're using. I tend to think that craft is something that the craftsman does or the artist does, but it becomes art when it's recognized by the audience,
Hmm.
when it's appreciated. And some art, it takes a lifetime for an artist for it to be fully appreciated. But it's still that. It still comes from that reservoir of feeling and skill. And you have to have both to produce it.
Yeah. Along these lines, you had a great line where, again, I read this in another piece. You said, quote, "To me, success is the satisfaction you get from playing and singing songs that still hold their meaning to you."
Yes.
And which I thought was great, and also speaks to, especially in today's environment where the music industry has changed so much. Oh,
Good
my
cat.
cat wants to get in on the interview. The
It's an
music industry has changed so much, and there's, I don't know, to me what just stood out about that was, okay, here's something you can count on. Here's something as a musician you can actually control. Um and there's so much out of musicians' control. I'm wondering, is that the quintessential North Star for any musician? What you said there is just, okay, this is what you have control over, and this is what you should always aim for.
right. I think so. In that, I mean, this is just for me. I can't speak for others. But the thing that made me pick up that guitar and and begin to pour myself through it and out of it was um, that sort of that well of longing, that longing for people and elements of the past that you put into um, kind of a cinema of of experiences for yourself that you draw on, and then those experiences tend to evoke the feeling that when you're playing, you try to find where that feeling is, through your hands, through the guitar, until you have something that begins to, connect to that feeling. And then whatever words you have as you sing them begin to, in a sense, mold themselves into that feeling.
Hmm.
And when you've got one that's really good, you know it. I mean, every
Mhm.
good writer I know knows it when they got one. It's like having a salmon on the line.
um, and then getting back to the circular turns in particular, both the studio tunes and the live tunes, when you're singing, your singing voice, it's smooth, it has a gentle kind of manner to it. It's a slightly higher pitch. Um but just talking now, and when you hear you talking to the audience on the recordings, your speaking voice has this really great depth and timbre to it, and I'm wondering if you've ever tried singing in that deeper register that it's your speaking voice has evolved into.
Uh, I I haven't, and I think part of the trick to doing that is to tune your guitar down
Mm-hmm.
half a step or a whole step. Um, I have a couple friends that sing half a step down intentionally, uh, but you know you have to use tuners and a whole bunch of other electronic assistance,
Yeah.
and so you rely on the key.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the keys that are most comfortable: G, A, D, E, um, C. You know, those are the keys that you use because they're the most easily available on the guitar. If
Mm-hmm.
you're playing piano, different deal. Then you're playing in B flat or C or F, E flat even. Um, and those, I mean, they're completely different registers. So you sing differently when you're singing, let's say, in B flat or E flat than
Mm-hmm.
you were singing in C or D, just because the key dictates to where your vocal range is going to be.
Yeah. And then speaking of your playing, it's, once you listen, when you really listen to what's going on, there's a lot that goes on with your guitar work. It's not just a simple strum of a chord. There's uh, um, picking and different stuff going on with the frets. Um, but it's still subtle. It's not abrasive. It's not like a look at me kind of guitar playing, but there's a lot going on. And I'm wondering, how much does that reflect who you are as a person? Um, because you could argue that your songwriting is very similar to your guitar playing. There's a lot going on to it, but it's not a grab you by the lapels, shouting delivery.
Well, essentially everything you're doing, you're playing, you're singing, is in service to the song. It's about the song. I mean, that's what you want them to go away with, um, that you hope has touched them.
Mm-hmm.
Not your great technique or anything. I don't have great technique. I mean, for all these years that I've been playing, it's essentially what serves the song, not what impresses the audience that they want to hear me play instrumentals all night long. I can't do that. So it's as you get better, I think your technique contributes to your writing. Because now you have more areas to pull from and to rely on that support the feelings that you're trying to convey through your words. And in that sense, I think the best writers, however well they play and however complicated their structures may be, it's always in service to the song.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of Sondheim or Jimmy Webb or Dylan, whoever.
Yeah. And then also along the lines of your guitar work, that it has a really interesting tone going on, especially the live recordings on this album. Uh it it's clean, but it kind of carries, and I'm wondering what's the secret to getting that particular guitar tone, and how did that evolve for you over time?
Well, I used to use a lot of different pickups. I mean, everybody I know, plays live has gone through the same thing. How can we get, because you're playing a guitar that you have chosen because of the sound of it.
Mm-hmm.
How does it sound in the room when you're just playing by yourself? That's, a lot of times you can't afford to take those guitars on the road. But um, um, I have a very simple passive pickup in all my guitars. It's a K and K, and the reason that I chose the K and K was that it sounds like the guitar. And there are a lot of pickups that you can get. They're called piezo pickups, and they always have a little sound in them. That's the pickup sound. It's kind of like a little quack. And after a while, you get so tired of that sound. You just want the guitar to speak like it does when you're playing it in the room. And the K&K was the pickup that I ultimately came to that does that. And
Okay.
Nothing magical. It's just an honest pickup.
Okay. But yeah, it sounds magical. And I don't know, maybe it's the simplicity of it, or I don't know. Then again, I've talked to a lot of musicians who say, what's that line? Tone is in the bones. It's, you can hand the guitar player a completely different guitar and it's still going to sound like him.
Yeah, I remember, this is from years ago. Andre Segovius did a series of master classes, and he had students like John Williams. I mean, people that became the great classical guitar players of their generation. And he would play a piece, and then the student would play it, and then he'd take the student's guitar and play it just as beautifully as he played it on his own guitar. And you realize that it was in the master's hands where the tone was. And that's just playing with creativity is often and as much as you can.
Yeah. And then I don't know, this is a minor question, but I'm just curious because there's so much material in this album and there are two parts to it. Why release this as one big album rather than like two albums, a studio album and a live album?
You'd have to ask the Wizards at Sunset Boulevard.
Okay.
I think that, it was something that Len Fico liked, and he thought that the live set complemented the recorded songs, of which, they're all from 2000 on. So, I mean, they weren't like a set of songs that people had heard a great deal. Some of them they knew, but not those versions of them. And there isn't very much of me playing live. So I think he thought it was a good idea to balance the instrumentation of the studio recording with just the sort of the bareness of me just playing guitar.
Yeah. And one thing that I would recommend this album that I especially liked is with the live tracks, they kept in some of your talking to the audience and relating to the audience, which to me it makes it creates that kind of club vibe, that kind of you're in a cafe and you're listening to someone perform, and it helps establish that intimacy, and gives a little bit into your personality. Not to mention the great information you pass along. For instance, I learned from this that there is a perfect TV station for when you're smoking pot, according to you. So,
And they changed it.
oh, really?
They bummed me out. NASA used to have a channel that just had the Earth turning, right?
Mhm.
And it'd be cloud covered, or but you'd try and recognize where all the continents were and all of that. It was perfect, and you could just turn whatever sound was going on, because they didn't have much in the way of a soundtrack to it. Just turn the sound off, huff and puff a little bit, and get that guitar out and just play to the world turning. Don't do it anymore. I loved it. It was one of my favorite things.
Yeah, there used to be the I can't remember. I don't think it was Apple TV, but there was one of the streaming services where when it kind of went to sleep, if you hadn't pushed play in a long time, it would default, and it was the satellite view of the Earth. And I can't remember which one that was, but that was always especially cool. Also, because you could tap it and it would let you know what section of the Earth it's over if you couldn't recognize it.
I wrote, this is how bad I got. I wrote a letter to NASA.
Oh,
saying, periodically, could you just put an overlay so that we know where we are on the planet?
mm-hmm.
I mean, you could sort of guess, but you weren't sure if it was Sea of Japan or all of those things that would have been really a wonderful teaching aid to not just kids, but to all of us.
Yeah. I mean, especially because this particular satellite view also had night shots. And so sometimes by the lights along the coastline, you could kind of figure it out, but you still weren't always sure. So it was great that you could just tap the remote and then it would bring up, oh, this is, yeah, as you said, off the coast of Japan or something to that effect. And like, oh, okay, interesting.
I wish they would do that again. I thought it was, I mean, I just, love the idea of just looking at the Earth turning.
Mm-hmm.
And, plus, when I'm playing, I always have some kind of a picture on. If I'm in my office, a lot of times I'll have explore.org. Has a whole bunch of channels on it. And I happen to like the bears up at on Katmai. Especially in salmon season, because all the bears are eating salmon. So sometimes you're watching 20 bears at the Brooks Falls, dealing with all the salmon coming up. And it's a particular fondness I have of both salmon and bears.
Yeah. And so it also kind of stimulates the creative juices.
Well, I'm playing, I'm just going over the ruts in the roads. I'm not really writing things to those pictures.
Okay.
But the pictures are just, it's a place I like,
Yeah.
Be there, vicariously.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you were drifting into like that Allman Brothers Jessica instrumental where apparently Dickie Betts wrote it to go along to the sight of his daughter crawling along the floor. But no, I get that. It's just all right. I'm going to put myself in a nice environment, visually speaking.
And I suppose, I mean, in that sense, you do play to it, but it's what I'm playing is not necessarily intentionally trying to connect to it to get a song.
I got it. Okay. All right. That covers everything I had. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
No, we've touched on the album. That's the most important thing. I would like people to hear it however they can hear it on their music service, or buy a copy.
Yeah.
What a novel idea.
Right.
It's 20 years, not necessarily the last 20 years, but kind of the last 20 years of what I've been doing. And some with friends, again, the live set is at a friend's place, concert hall in St. Paul. It's a pretty good idea of who and what I am and what I do. And for anyone who's, still thinking of me as Good Time Charlie, I would like to, disabuse them that, there's more to it than that.